So, newsflash, I like Mario Party. I think it's fair to say that the ones on GameCube really upped the ante with interesting ideas and concepts, including the boards. I have fond memories from many of these boards, memorizing their design, layout, music. I was fully engaged in the grand Mario Party universe. I've always wanted to explore how each board would stack up. And what better way to fuel the flames of online righteousness than with a tier list? I grew up playing most of these boards, so I'm definitely going to have some bias. So that is why I'm bringing on a guest to bring their own thoughts and ranking of each board. Now you can yell at 2 people. Please welcome BladedStrider.
Did somebody say Mario Party? What's up there, Yellow? Heard you needed some help with a board tier list for some Mario Party games. Little did you know, I'm the master of Mario Party 4.
Well, that's good, because we are going to talk about 4. I'm guessing you know enough about 5, 6, and 7 as well?
Well, hold on a second. Okay, I'm all set now. Although, I guess I should look a little better for the occasion. Stunning, right?
We're gonna go over every board from Mario Party 4 to Mario Party 7, addressing the overall design, features, and music. This is obviously not a comprehensive analysis on every little mechanic and Easter egg and trivia. These are just our casual, very subjective thoughts. If you're a ride or die for Boo's Haunted Bash, brace yourself. We're gonna cover 25 boards, so strap in. We'll be as honest as possible, without trying to be too petty. On top of that, each of us will have our own tier list. If you want to rank the boards for yourself, the link to the one we're using will be in the description. As I've established before, Mario Party 4 is kinda my favorite game of all time, no biggie. I might have a little bit of nostalgic bias around these boards. I don't love every board, but regardless, I still hold Mario Party 4 very close to my heart. Toad's Midway Madness is definitely my most nostalgic board. It was what introduced me to Mario Party, and by extension, Nintendo games as a whole. Honestly, I hold this one with high regard without a ton of critical reasoning. This is just a very solid starter board. No generic grass themes here. This is an entire amusement park by the very host himself, Toad. There are various attractions that fit this theme. A roller coaster, a merry-go-round, a rocket game, the spinning teacup. Oh god, the teacups. What a wonderfully sadistic mechanic to put right at the beginning of the board. It definitely makes this board memorable, but not in a good way. I guess it's supposed to introduce new players to how luck-based Mario Party is, but at the very beginning, seems a bit punishing, especially since at least one person is bound to loop back and have to try the teacups again. That could have been implemented elsewhere, or at least not in the starting area. Other than those godforsaken teacups, I think the rest of Toad's Midway Madness is quite solid. It has such a dynamic board layout. It feels like you're zipping around the board. The music is also a personal favorite of mine. It really sells the childlike wonder of an amusement park. Admittedly, it leans towards the basic side, but that's all it needs to be. Personally, it's a great introduction to Mario Party 4. I'm definitely putting this board in the S tier. A ton of bias, but oh well.
Toad's Midway Madness might be the best starting board in Mario Party to this very day. I believe it gives an amazing and great introduction to the board and its mechanics, as well as the mechanics of Mario Party itself. Everything is easily accessible to reach, and the rocket roller coaster is a great way to cross from one side of the board to the other. It's a large board, and while traveling around can feel daunting, it's pretty much the one-for-one experience of traveling around an amusement park. The minigames, when you can reach them, are exciting and very rewarding once you wrap your brain around them. While I do have a lot of good things to say, there are a few problems I have with this board. The board itself has an annoying gimmick right near the beginning with the set of teacups. You go wherever that arrow points, that's simple enough. What's truly annoying is if someone lands on the happening space, it changes the arrow to another direction. That wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't right in the beginning, meaning that half the players will always be stuck in the starting area by the first or second turn. And while a star does appear right behind that arrow, it's very hard to get it, as there's multiple spots that star could appear. Additionally, while Toad's Midway Madness is very generous with coins, you don't really get to use them unless it's on items or the lottery. With something such as Goomba's Greedy Gala, it makes sense given the theme of the board, but here, you just kinda get coins and either buy items or use them on the lotto. A great starting board, but still has a bit of problems, which is why I put it at the top of A tier.
Boo's Haunted Trash, excuse me. Boo's Haunted Bash, on the other hand, is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I don't like it. I don't understand the appeal of this board. It's essentially a rectangle, a boring rectangle nonetheless. I get the theme of paths disappearing and reappearing like ghosts, but it's not compelling enough to me. It feels like every other board does this, where one path becomes blocked and then unblocked. The only way to change the paths is to pass through Big Boo in the middle, which would be useful to block other players from crossing. If these mystery trains didn't cross over the invisible paths anyway, even the train gives you this weird eye-level perspective. So unless you've memorized where you're headed beforehand, you cannot tell where you're gonna end up. You'd only want to activate the bridges if you absolutely needed to, like a star space or landing on one of 2 happening spaces on the entire board. At that point, you would have to go out of your way to activate the paths, or wait for someone to activate it for you. The problem is, every time someone passes the giant Boo, the bridges switch no matter what, so you can never be certain if you can cross the bridge when you get there. So why even try? Can you tell I have a lot of issues with this board? None of these elements make sense together. This board makes you feel like everything is out of your control. I guess it's supposed to be like, ooh, everything is not what it seems. Yes, it is not what it seems. It's the illusion of a good board. The music is also pretty much basic Halloween-y music. Nothing too memorable there. At least Boo is actually accessible. It would be an insult if they were hidden behind a mini pipe or something. Boo's Haunted Bash is my least favorite board, pretty much of all time, and we haven't even covered most of them. That's how much I don't get this board. Easy bottom of the barrel. Boo's Haunted Bash belongs in the Boo's Haunted Trash tier. No further explanation.
Oh boy. Boo's Haunted Bash. Yeah, I'm pretty much echoing Yellow here. This board is kind of bottom of the barrel, and here are a few reasons why I think so. The problem with this board is it's just a square. And while some can be said for other boards, they have parts that jag out and make the layout a bit more memorable, but in a good way. Here, it's just a square, like a womp. Additionally, the gimmick of red boos doesn't really do much except change the path you're gonna take. Like, yeah, I wanted to go on a certain path, but it's a literal minor inconvenience if you have any item that makes you get high rolls. Even without mushrooms, it doesn't really change much. The minigames can be fun, when you can get to them. These ones feel out of the way in my opinion, as you either need a high roll in front of the pipes or multiple mini mushrooms. While they are fun, some feel finicky. Mostly the piano one, as I had pressed the button in time as was instructed, but Waluigi just kinda stood there, so I missed getting the highest coins possible. This happened a few times on the same key, so it might just be me, but I'm still salty. There also seems to be a lack of happening spaces that make it enjoyable. Like, half the time they do nothing, especially if Big Boo isn't there, since you have to land on Big Boo on a certain amount of turns to summon him, while there are no red boos. Stars also feel very easy to grab, as there are no preventatives from the other than red boos that eventually make the same pathways that you can grab them even without the pathways. In our time playing, Yellow and I mostly had the stars on the outside of the board, which is the easiest place to obtain them. The biggest positive is that the coffin train grabs everyone in its path, so it's fun to mess people up with that, or help if you want to sabotage someone in common. This board unfortunately deserves its own tier, as it feels like it's the absolute weakest of the board in Mario Party 4, which is a shame because it could have been good if they just changed more about it. Boo's Haunted Bash goes in the Boo's Haunted Trash bin.
Surely anything can be better than the last board, and thankfully, Shy Guy's Jungle Jam is easily much better. This board is essentially divided into 2 halves at the mercy of the river. If you land on these happening spaces, you have a chance to block access to the other side for a bit. One thing I always remember from this board is praying that you don't make the Shy Guy statue anger at you for no reason. It's an interesting mechanic that works well with using the Klepto to overcome that blockade. Yeah, there's not much to complain about. It's a good board. There's just nothing notable to comment on. There's no wacky gimmick to differentiate it. This is a solid board with some elements of chaos. The music is also fine. It thankfully sounds like an actual jungle, especially the drums. If you want a good standard board that's less cruel than those teacups, Jungle Jam is an easy option. This board goes in the A tier. Minimal notes, as they say.
Shy Guy's Jungle Jam is a good recovery from that last tragic board that came our way. You have a few options to move from one side of the board to the other through the use of Klepto, especially since there's a chance you get a ton of coins from the volcano, or Shy Guy himself bringing you across the treacherous waters through a raft. The board minigames, I know, just roll with it, are pretty fun, albeit a bit out of the way. Not so much so as booze-haunted trash, but still annoying. Stars can be a bit out of the way without the use of items, which is a breath of fresh air from the last board, making you actually use resources. A Mega Mini Hammer is a make or break for your opponent of choice. I'm a big fan of the jungle vibe aesthetic, as it's very Indiana Jones-like and reminds me of Mysteryland from Mario Party 2. The river mechanic is fun and allows for chaos in the right way, blocking off the star from others but allowing you to go over to that side, unless they have a lamp. While the river raft Shy Guy is there, I never found myself using it, even if the river overflowed. Altogether, this board has a lot going for it, opposed to just being a square. For me, Shy Guy's Jungle Jam is appropriately placed at the top of A tier.
Ooh, Koopa's Seaside Soiree. I have conflicting feelings about this one. On one hand, I love the tropical setting. The music really reminds me of summertime. In fact, these weird floating pathways actually work in this board's favor, cause it looks like a pier floating over water. However, the rampant RNG is what sadly bogs down this board for me. Pretty much every mechanic of this board is at the mercy of RNG, and most of them you can't even say no. The Koopa Cabana is like the Koopa Bank, but literally no one benefits from it. You either keep paying every time you pass by it, or you unluckily land on the happening space and you're forced to pay the total amount, only for it to start from square one. Since this was my first Mario Party game, I wasn't aware of the Koopa Bank, so I didn't know how nonsensical it was until I found out what it originally was supposed to be like. If they're trying to sell this board as a tourist trap, they definitely succeeded. The other happening spaces are these dolphins that take you to another part of the board, whether you like it or not. The main offenders are these branching banana pathways, which, you guessed it, are completely determined by luck. A coin flip, no less. I would have really liked this board, but too many of these random elements seem like they don't belong here. They seem like they belong in the next board. This board is going in the C tier.
Ah, Koopa's Seaside Soiree. This is a classic board in my personal opinion, and it's the one that I used to spend the most time on along with Goomba's Greedy Gala. The layout for this board is very fun and large, allowing for RNG to dictate your path, something we will later talk about in Goomba's Greedy Gala. I have a soft spot for this board, as this is the board that my family and I would mostly play on. This board is very large, but in this case it kind of works out. It's a resort style, so it makes sense it's large. Additionally, the music and aesthetics really do fit the vibe. I will say, the happening spaces do feel very weird to get on, whether it's the fish picking one or the watermelon happening space. They're fun and all, but they're hard to get to. The orange happening space is pathetic. It moves you a total of maybe 12 or so spaces. Depending on how you look at it, it could help, but in most cases it doesn't. The other happening spaces are pretty interesting, with the other fruits taking you across the board via a dolphin, sometimes earning coins in the process, while the other ones destroy the cabana that you have building up from the Koopa Bank-like mechanic. Yes, in this board there is a Koopa Bank-like mechanic. Every time you pass a certain space, there's 2 of them, you pay 5 coins into the cabana. And while this may seem a bit annoying for some people, I really like it. You get to see it build up from a small little bikini bar to something grandiose. The most I've ever seen is a very Asian style sushi bar like thing. And I hope to see more than that because this thing is amazing. Although there is one other thing I'd like to talk about.
Ukiki is God. Ukiki is omnipotent. His decision is life, the creator of fate, the branches of path. We bend to his will. We are living in his world. He is our God.
Overall, the board is pretty fun, very enjoyable and memorable for me. I'm gonna have to put this in S tier.
Goomba's Greedy Gala is a board where RNG is the actual theme, which I think works in its favor. Something like the banana branching path would have been a lot more suitable in this board than Seaside Soiree. Everything is chaotic. 9 times out of 10, things will not go your way on this board. Instead of trying to balance the randomness, they just leaned into it, and that's what I admire about this one. It's not trying to be balanced at all, which makes this board stick out to me. This is a board that takes a crazy approach and runs with it. I never realized how many RNG hurdles you might need to go through to maybe get the star. First, you have to pray that the roulette is in a good mood, then you trust that the Goomba doesn't screw you over, and then trust that you won't accidentally send yourself to the other side of the board. It's very unfair, but it's gambling, so it fits. The music and board design definitely give off casino vibes. It looks like a top-down view of a casino floor actually. Everyone's gambling, coins are spent left and right. Sometimes you just have to laugh at the RNG to have a good time. I can't bring myself to hate this one. Goomba's Greedy Gala is easy A-tier material. Very memorable.
Ooh, Goomba's Greedy Gala. Now this might be my favorite board in a Mario Party game. This board encapsulates everything a Mario Party board should. The aesthetic is very fun and it really sells the whole casino gambling look. Now with it being a large board, the way of getting around is quite interesting. You use a roulette wheel and wherever it lands on is the area of the board that you'll be taken to. You can kinda influence your location by paying the Goomba more money, but it really doesn't feel like it has any weight to it. You'll really want to try and land on the star spots so that you can not only pick the area that you'll go to, but you'll also receive 20 coins in the process. Whatever you do, don't go to red. It's a pit of hell that the only solace is that if you get lucky at the lotto, you may win money. But other than that, it's kinda not a good spot to be in. There is one other way to get out of this area, and that's by losing a board event to a Goomba. Not even the host Goomba. You see, as you go across the board, you'll be stopped in certain parts by said Goomba, and you'll have to play a dice game. Get a higher number than him and yoo-hoo! You get to keep going. Get a lower number and you'll go straight back to start, meaning you'll have to do the whole roulette process all over again. In the case of being in the red area, it's better to lose, to be honest, unless you have a mini mushroom. The happening spaces are fun and you can make a lot of coins playing them, but other than that, there isn't a lot event-wise that the board offers. Going back to aesthetics and atmosphere, the slot machines are a real nice touch, and while I don't mind it, the music is almost casino-like, but it slightly misses the mark. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door did a better job, for example, when it came to the little casino area in Rogueport. You usually find yourself having a lot of coins, which makes sense given the casino's mechanic, so that isn't out there for this theme of the board. Overall, I do believe this board is my favorite Mario Party board, as you can love something and still have gripes with it. Solid S tier.
Bowser's Gnarly Party. Oof. I don't say this lightly, but what a mess. I know. This is coming from my favorite game of all time. I never unlocked this board as a kid, so I don't really have an emotional attachment to this one. Even if I did, this would be far from my favorite. Honestly, I'm disappointed that this is the final board. As a Bowser board, everything is supposed to feel like it's against you. It's supposed to feel like utter chaos, but it doesn't feel like those things at all. Instead, it feels like they were just thrown in there without any rhyme or reason. These collapsing bridges are basically Teacups 2.0, but somehow worse, so I guess they're Teacups negative 2.0? This time, it takes 3 players crossing over for the paths to alternate. You'd think that this would solve the issue of someone looping around against their will, but these bridges introduce a different version of the same problem. Now nobody is going where they want to go. You end up going around the same paths over and over until someone finally changes the bridge. What's worse is that it doesn't even matter if you cross the bridge as a mini or a mega. The bridge will still collapse at a normal rate, and this takes a while. It makes this board feel so much smaller than it actually is because you're all looping around the same general areas. I'm not even going to talk about the happening spaces. If that wasn't enough, Bowser can randomly force everyone to become mini or mega. Chaotic? Yes. Unnecessary? Absolutely. This serves no purpose but to frustrate everyone. I guess one interesting element is that Bowser is actually a part of this board. He appears anywhere as if he's just another board event. I do like that he tortures you depending on what size you are. That's something that I wish was carried over to the bridges. It seems like the designers tried their best to make this board more interesting, but personally, I feel like it still ended up really sloppy. These chaotic elements make sense individually, but altogether, yikes. There is no winning in Bowser's Gnarly Party. Everyone just suffers together. It's safe to say that this board is an absolute mess, but if nothing else, this is far from forgettable. Unlike some other trash, well, I guess the music is the least memorable part of this board, but that's besides the point. I'm putting this board in the D tier.
Bowser's Gnarly Party, huh? Funny. I don't remember playing this board too much, even though I had completed 6 out of the 8 character story modes by the second year of owning the game. Yes, this board is something I always forget about, but let's see if it's actually forgettable in a bad way. So I want to start off by saying there is a lot of chaotic flow to go around when it comes to this board. The bridge mechanic, the Bowser mechanic, and the shops all have decent layouts, and the pace towards them don't feel too out of the way. The Boo shop, though, definitely feels like a force to get to, and that kind of takes the board down a bit in my opinion. It's a Bowser board. If there's going to be chaos, it should go all out. Make Boo a little easier to get to, that way everyone's constantly battling for stars. Passing by Bowser has a multitude of effects, like changing the position of players or sending someone back to start. I have seen, in a rare case, someone using the Bowser suit and passing by Bowser, in which he gives them about 50 coins and compliments how they look. And while it is rare, I think it's a nice little touch. I will say, however, that if you have a specific bonus star in mind that you want to go for, it's very annoying to deal with the Bowser shenanigans. The board events and minigames are fun enough, but like the Boo shop, they're a bit out of the way. Aesthetically, this board fits the Bowser vibe, and while I think that Koopa Kid nailed the way Bowser himself would have made the board in Mario Party 4, I still think that there are some glaring things with it. I think my favorite board event out of all the ones here is the one near the bottom of the board where you choose an item that you don't want first, and then choose one you do. It's very tricky with how it's presented, as it just gives you an item to select, and the minute you select it and there's an X on that item, you're probably gonna panic and try and figure out the second item that you remembered before time runs out. Overall, to me, this is one of the better Bowser boards, and although it isn't the greatest board of Mario Party 4, it's still a good chunk above the rest to come. This goes in B tier for me.
Alright, this is where I take off the rose-tinted glasses. Mario Party 5 is a good game, but in my opinion, this is where the board designs really struggled, since it was before they mixed up the board mechanics. Toy Dream is definitely my least favorite starter board. I think it's super generic and tiny compared to Toad's Midway Madness. It indeed does look like a Toy Dream, but the setting could have been in any other kid's game, and you wouldn't know that it stems from the Mario universe. It doesn't feel like it's designed specifically for Mario Party. I suppose the only memorable part is the train that transports you to either part of the board, but that's if you land on the happening spaces. The music doesn't really stand out either. In fact, when I listen to it for too long, it gets really grating. It's too happy and cheery. Wait, what does that say about me? Anyway, there's nothing substantial to say about this one. I don't believe that this is a good representation of a Mario Party starter board. I feel like it's purposely pandering to kids. Not even in a nostalgic way. It's just toys. Yippee. Toy Dream is easily going in the D tier.
I'm gonna be honest, I did not play a lot of the boards in Mario Party 5, mostly because I didn't own Mario Party 5. I did borrow it from a friend, and when I tried to do the story mode and just kinda got sidetracked with all the sick tank battle gameplay they included, which I unfortunately found more enjoyable than all the boards in this game. Anyways, on to the first board, Toy Dream. In my opinion, this is probably actually the worst of the starting boards in the Mario Party series. Now, I can understand why people don't enjoy Mario Party 4 boards, that's fine. But Mario Party 5 boards are on a whole nother level of, okay, how do people prefer this over Mario Party 4? Like, I'm genuinely curious. My biggest gripes come down to that it's small. Like, really small, especially after the boards in 4 were so large. I bet people probably complain that the boards in 4 were too big, so they probably cut them in half, but the only problem is it feels like with 5 good rolls, you've already lapped the board, and that's only with 1 dice. There isn't a whole lot going on this board either, making it kinda bland, although Chugga-Conroy going around the board is a nice little touch. I also like the fact that players moving over board spaces with items have a small soundbite play, and that's kinda nice, it adds a little bit to moving. The train happening space is probably the best of the bunch, as getting coins by jumping in time gives you a reward for actually landing on that space. The music was forgettable, but the board aesthetic vibes were interesting enough. Definitely one of the weaker boards, and rightfully it goes into D tier.
Rainbow Dream is a much better upgrade from whatever Toy Dream was. Since this board is divided into 4 distinct sections, it feels a lot bigger, even if the number of spaces are around the same amount. I appreciate that different zones mix up the environment so that there's something new to look at, and the setting is thankfully not generic because it features actual characters from the Mario universe, though I still have a few problems with the board. I don't like how you're essentially forced to go one direction, even though you technically have the choice to not advance and loop around your section, you would never do that unless the star is in your area. And if the next star is in the area you just left, guess what? You have to rush all the way back around to maybe get the star. The gondola doesn't help much either, since it just carries you to the next section anyway. I wish you were allowed to cross the rainbow bridge both ways, so that you're not forced to always go in a clockwise motion. I don't think it would have broken the mechanics of the board either. Just add the rainbow spots on both ends and then boom, problem solved. It would have made the movement much less rigid. The music doesn't really stand out either, but at least it's not as grating as Toy Dream. It's definitely a better board. It's just unfortunately bogged down by its pacing. Rainbow Dream is going in the B tier.
Rainbow Dream, I'll start off by saying, it's larger than Toy Dream, which is a good start already. I like the aesthetic of this board a lot more than Toy Dream, as even if it looks kind of barren with the background, there are a lot more moving parts that work towards the board's charm. There are about 7 happening spaces on this board, with 4 being tied to the main gimmick of the centerpiece board moving in a clockwise manner, kind of like a Ferris wheel. Where your character will get off will depend at the happening space that you landed on, and the different happening space that comes up after it. It's a fun gimmick that makes mobility interesting, and something that is already better than the last board. The other 3 happening spaces are also interesting, with the bottommost having you mash A to get orbs, and another one causing you and other players to go back to the start through a stream of water. The last happening space has you pick a rainbow where the destination is random, and there's also a chance to get coins going down it. There is another part of the board that is there, but it feels really slow as there's not a lot of spaces placed around it, meaning you're going to be seeing that middle area a lot. Going with that, there are a lot of blue spaces and a few red spaces, and while I'm normally fine with this, it kind of makes the ability to change the coin lead around that much harder. The music is kind of forgettable, but at least I can hum the tune more than Toy Dream. I have to place this in the middle of C tier.
Pirate Dream appears to be huge because of the verticality, which I like. Rainbow Dream had a more appealing look, but I'd say this one has more going on. Most of that comes from the movement of this board. It feels like you're constantly moving around, whether it's grabbing the womp to make a shortcut, or accidentally sending yourself to the bottom with the waterfall. You never know where you're gonna end up. This is what I want in terms of meaningful happening spaces. Each one is interesting and fits into the environment, not just some throwaway back to the start event. The layout is good for the most part, though the womp and thwomp placements are strangely very close to each other. I would have liked it if they were more spread out. I also found it interesting that they chose a cavern to depict a pirate adventure. It doesn't really scream pirate adventure at first glance, other than the ship, but that's not a bad thing. I'm glad that they didn't go for the stereotypical tropical setting for a pirate board. I'd say the music is fine. I don't really remember it off the top of my head. It's just there, inoffensive. Not really much to complain about. Pirate Dream gets a B from me.
Pirate Dream is an interesting case where the board is more vertical than horizontal, so this one kinda stands out pretty well amongst the rest of the Mario Party boards, at least until future installments. Unfortunately for me, it still pales in comparison to some of the boards that are to follow this. With the main mechanic being most of the happening spaces cause a boulder to make you or other players move around the board awkwardly, it's kind of repetitive. Speaking of movement, the womp and thwomp aspects of the board are also placed kind of weirdly as the amount of spaces between them don't really feel big enough. While they do lead to 2 separate levels of the board, it doesn't feel like there is enough of a difference. The DK space is also out of the way as well, making it feel like the trek might not be worth it in the very end. I feel as though the board mechanics are more to be appreciated than the events or aesthetic itself, which I have to say is severely lacking. Now, as much as it sounds like I don't like this board, I do like that it tries to be different when it comes to the layout, and I'm happy to say it does a better job than a good chunk of Mario Party 5 boards. Just expect to always have a buddy after each boulder event. This board sits comfortably in the middle of C tier.
Undersea Dream. I forgot that you existed. Should this even be counted as a board? It's embarrassingly tiny, to the point where this is the least memorable of all GameCube boards. This feels like the bare minimum of a legal board. I find it really difficult to say anything unique about this one. It's just a blob, but at least it's not like some rectangle. I guess the board is divided into 2 distinct sections, but those honestly just feel like set dressing. They were like underwater, coral reef, boom, Undersea Dream. Submit. What's even worse is that some happening spaces give players the option to accept or decline, which is so unlike how happening spaces work. So even some of the randomness of this board feels deflated. I really don't know how this one got greenlit. It is technically a board, but this is the definition of a generic Mario Party board. Dare I say, it's more generic than Toy Dream. Undersea Dream is like bottom of the barrel D tier.
Oh, Undersea Dream. It's a shame. You could have ended up good the way you were. Usually water-based boards can be really cool, especially like Koopa's Seaside Soiree and Shy Guy Jungle Jam. This board is the opposite of Pirate Dream, being that it's more horizontal than vertical. Yes, this board has multiple layers to it, but you never seem to go to the top part for either side. If you land on the dolphin space, it will always bring you back to the same space, which is the right shell on the right side of the board. Honestly, the biggest problem with this board is that it really doesn't have anything going on for it. It has one setback, and that's the dolphin. And as I said before, it just brings you to the same spot. Never back to start. Never a different location. Always the same spot. It's a shame. The music is kind of ripping off that Little Mermaid style of sound. If they had changed even that a little bit more, it would have added a bit more towards the board itself. The background is cool, but there's not much going for it. It's still better than Boo's Haunted Trash, but it's unfortunate how it came out. This board is placed right at the top of D tier.
Future Dream. I also have conflicting feelings about this one. On one hand, finally, a unique board layout with its 3 distinct sections, but on the other hand, why is it so tiny? I feel like this is a problem with Mario Party 5 boards in general. Something about these boards makes them feel claustrophobic. They definitely could have gotten away with having this board be gigantic with like 99 spaces, but they just stuck with the standard number of spaces like every other board, which really limited the potential. It's not offensively small like Undersea Dream, but this board could have been so much more memorable if it was just bigger. The music is actually one of the more memorable tracks that sounds very bombastic, like some sort of space frontier. I'd say that board events are serviceable, nothing too crazy, just neat space dressing. This board falls into the more generic side, but at least the layout is actually unique this time. It's a fine board, and it actually solves the issue that Rainbow Dream had, where you can actually go back and forth between sections. Just could have been so much more. Future Dream is definitely going into the C tier.
Future Dream is another case of a board that I had absolutely no idea going into Mario Party 5. My first impressions of the board are that it's futuristic, and it uses a space board. Ooh. Either way, let's start an honest look at the board. Using the rockets as transportation from happening spaces was a good idea as it covers some of the necessary movement around the board. Air taxis also being used as a means of transportation is another great idea, and it really gives me Futurama vibes, so that was a nice little touch. A slot machine lines up one of the happening spaces, and that really does it for whatever you need to know about the happening spaces. The board, like Yellow said, is split into 3 sections, with the middle being the one you're seeing a lot of, but it doesn't overshadow the other 2 sections of the board. The music sounds very space-like and gives a triumphant, overly confident series of trumpets to show how futuristic the board really is. Rockets and space taxis as normal transportation, kinda meh, but still one of the ones I'll remember purely because of the layout. This board for me brings up the rear of C tier.
Sweet Dream is one of the nicer boards, and even though it has fewer spaces, it seems larger than most boards from 5. This one also has changing paths whenever someone crosses them. If you recall from the last game, Toad's Midway Madness also had this mechanic, but ran into the looping problem in the beginning. Adding to that, Bowser's Gnarly Party also had a similar mechanic, but had the issue of retreading the same paths. Sweet Dream basically fixes both of those faults and makes the mechanic work in its favor. They were clean and simple alternating paths that were well placed on the board. I've had so many issues with boards having generic layouts, or boards having mechanics that go against the layout, but this one spices up the layout just enough to make it stand out. And it also makes sense. Not everything is perfect about Sweet Dream, like how the music is a bit generically sweet, or how 3 happening spaces literally take you to the same exact space, but this is a good example of a standard board with a twist. Nothing more. Sweet Dream is going in the B tier.
Sweet Dreams is a Mario Party 5 board that I can honestly say does a good job feeling like a Mario Party board. This board is actually smaller than the other boards of the game, but it does such a good job building itself up as looking larger than it really is that it doesn't even matter. The board is just shy of 60 spaces, and the way it presents itself definitely shows that it seems much bigger than it actually is. This is aesthetically the most pleasing board in Mario Party 5, in my personal opinion. And the music, which sounds very candy shop-like, really ties it all together. It doesn't grate too much, and it doesn't stay longer than it needs to. It sounds just right. Two of the big happening spaces for me were the ones where all players will randomly have to give one thing to one player who landed on the happening space. It's all the same type of item, but it can range from orbs and coins to even stars, in the theme of a present for the player who landed on the space. The other interesting happening space that you can get a lot of coins from is the one that has you throwing colored orbs on candle tops. This nets you 5 coins per successful orb throw. Overall, this board is really solid, and it's a shame that it had to be in Mario Party 5, as in my opinion, it's the best board of the game. If this was in the other games, or at least the layout, it might pass off as average, but for me, this board is the very top of C tier, as it ties Mario Party 5 very well and can show it has competent board design.
Bowser's Nightmare. Bowser Nightmare, as it's officially called, feels like the perfect combination of what Mario Party 5 boards have to offer, which I don't think is a good thing. Even though this is the largest board in terms of spaces, it somehow feels smaller than it should because of how symmetrical it is. If you just want pain and suffering, the board, here you go. This board has the opposite problem from Gnarly Party. Before, it felt like everyone was retreading the same paths and waiting for something new to happen. Now it feels like too much is happening. Most of it out of the player's control. I get that it's the Bowser motif to inflict inconvenience, but this board takes it too far. It feels like you're trying to scrape by turn after turn while trying not to suffer too much. One happening space perfectly sums up the absurdity of this board. On either side, Bowser takes a leisurely stroll through one half of the board and turns every blue space he passes into a red space. And this effect lasts for at least 2 turns, meaning that those unlucky enough have to lose some coins against their will. I guess Bowser just hates fun? The music is indeed very Bowsery, as you'd expect. Not really memorable. I get this track mixed up with Bowser's Gnarly Party, but it's not bad. This board is definitely chaotic, but it's to the point where I would never go out of my way to play it. It's an upgrade from those dumb collapsing bridges, but that's it. This is not really a good board to play on, unless you really hate yourself and the people you're playing with. Like I said, this board kind of sums up the issue I have with Mario Party 5 boards in general. They felt smaller than they've ever been. The music and board designs feel more generic, and a lot of board events feel either recycled or pointless. But anyway, Bowser, without the apostrophe, Nightmare is going in the D tier.
Oh boy, Bowser's Nightmare. So, I have a hot take about this board actually. I really like the layout of this board compared to Bowser's Gnarly Party from Mario Party 4, but the main gimmick is atrocious. The middle area of the board, or as I dub it, Bowser's 8th Circle of Hell, is terrible to get stuck in, especially if the trigger of it is the last 5 turns and it happens to be all red spaces turning into Bowser spaces, seeing as there's a large amount of red spaces in that circle. The happening space has you pick the red or blue box. That's always a lose-lose, no matter which one you pick, as you either go to start or lose half your coins, really making Bowser unbearable in this board. In fact, you really don't want to land on happening spaces on this board due to everything being a lose-lose. This board has to be the most definitive version of chaos, but not in the good way. This music is very Bowser-like, so there isn't really much to talk about, and as much as I like the layout of this board, the entirety of it as a whole is not good. There's no way to actually feel like you're winning. You always feel like you're losing, and while that might be the mark of a good Bowser board, I feel like a Bowser board should also have you being rewarded for some of the stuff you land on. As much as I like this layout, it's not good enough to go above D tier.
Alright, now we're getting into the interesting boards with Mario Party 6. This game introduced new mechanics that didn't revolve around chasing the star all around the board. This is gonna make the rest of them far more compelling to talk about other than, this board's too small, this board's too boring. 6 also has the exclusive day and night cycle, which I believe we collectively love, so it'll only be something I briefly mention here and there. Before we get into the interesting mechanics, we have to begin with the vanilla starter board. Towering Treetop. I get it. You want to start with something safe and familiar before you introduce new wacky mechanics. I'd say this is one of the better starter boards. Not better than Toad's Midway Madness, but way better than Toy Dream. This is indeed Tree, the board. I really appreciate that the layout is a lot more vertical, like climbing a tree, which saves it from looking like a generic grassy environment. The music oddly sounds like chance time music or an intro to the board, not the main track. That might be just me. At the end of the day, this is still a starter board, so there's nothing too crazy about this one, other than the tree rudely sneezing without covering its mouth. Boo makes a comeback at night for Mario Party 4, but it got demoted to only a couple of boards in this game, which is a shame because you rarely get to see them. This board isn't horrible by any means, it's just very hard to make starter boards like fan favorites. Towering Treetop gets an average C from me.
Towering Treetop is definitely a tree. It gives me Woody Wood vibes from Mario Party 3, and this board actually feels like a base for how a lot of happening spaces will affect players in this game. The base template really feels like you'll win money from some, you'll lose money from others, and you'll be teleported somewhere else wherever you were originally from. The board layout itself is very large, so traversing it is a bit of a chore, but it's a better starting board than Toy Dream. While Mario Party 6 was innovative and it started to trend with a lot of different boards having a lot of different setups, this is just a starting board. So it's going to have the traditional style of reach the star, buy the star, 20 coins for the star. Not much is going to change except for maybe one or two of the happening spaces and the music and the aesthetic at night. And while it sounds like a lot, it really is not. I don't really have that much more to add to this other than the top happening space being Woody changing to Warukio. Instead of gaining coins, you lose coins. That's really the only difference that the day and night mechanic has on this board. It's a pretty decent starting board for the game, very average, but near the top of C tier for me.
Gadd's Garage. What a board. Despite this still being your typical Mario Party board, this is definitely one of the best boards in 6. Arguably one of the best in the entire GameCube lineup. Just like Gadd himself, this board feels like there's always something interesting happening because of all the different gadgets and gizmos. The board events have an interesting take and make sense given the context of the board. They're all about experiments and the unpredictability of science. Contrast that to Towering Treetop having things like random flying fluff as arbitrary means for transportation. This is how you do a standard board. One that you choose if you just want a basic but eventful Mario Party experience. The day and night cycle unfortunately feels like the weakest part, since all it really does is change the middle path and switch this one board event. But other than that, this is an incredibly solid board. So solid that it deserves to be in the elusive S tier. I said what I said.
Going off what Yellow said, Gadd's Garage could very well be considered one of the best boards of the entire GameCube lineup of Mario Party boards. For me, however, while I do like the way this board plays, it does lack in some aspects. I would rather get a lot of things such as Mario Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion, like kind of cameos in the background. When I initially looked at it, I really thought of Luigi's Engine Room from Mario Party 1. Aesthetically, it does fit Gadd with the large amount of inventions that all actually go in towards the happening spaces, such as teleporters, a large fan that sucks away coins, and an orb conversion machine. However, in my opinion, and just much like every other tier list, it is subjective. The most underwhelming part of this board is how the center rotates only during the day-night system. You aren't really going to be going through that centerpiece too often, so the effect of this is very negligible. For the good, it always feels like there's something new happening every turn, so it keeps the momentum of the board going and even builds it up. The happening spaces are placed far enough where it doesn't feel like you'll land on them every turn, but close enough when you're playing, you're going to actively be thinking about if your opponents will land on them. As stated, aside from losing coins, this event feels very similar to Towering Treetop, but this board just does it much better. As much praise as I give this board, it isn't really fully my cup of tea, but its mechanics and aesthetics are still up there, so I give it a placement of high B.
Faire Square is kinda weird to me. I always forget it exists until I see it as an option, but to be fair, this is technically a board with a new mechanic, where you can buy up to 5 stars at once, given that you can afford them. Let me get this out of the way. I don't really get the look of this board. Faire Square is described as a lit town with many buildings and Halloween decorations. Personally, I do not see that description at all. I don't get any Halloween town vibes from this board. If there were more Halloween colors like purple and orange, or even just more Halloween decorations, it would be more convincing, but as it stands, this just looks like a regular town with pointy roofs. It also doesn't even look like a fair either, so that's already -2 points. I guess the music kinda maybe sounds like a fair, but even then, it doesn't match the aesthetics at all. Anyway, the board isn't all too bad in the grand scheme of things. I'd say it's a decent board altogether, though I will say that there isn't any reason to go to the right side of the board, like ever, because you can always just circle around the middle section. So this board feels a bit smaller than it should. Even though this is a new type of board, this one feels really tame in comparison to the other types we'll see. So maybe that's why this board isn't all that memorable to me. The gambling and guessing games seem really out of place. But hey, I'll take anything to make this board more interesting. I don't really have a lot to complain about other than the theme of the board, so this board is just eh. Faire Square goes in the C tier.
Faire Square is just kinda there. And no, I didn't mean to rhyme on purpose. It's kind of a bland board, both visually and gameplay-wise. The music is very Faire-like, and until Yellow pointed it out when we were playing, I honestly didn't even know there was a subtle Halloween style to it. The big shtick for this board is the star price during the day and night. During the day, the star will be a stagnant 20 coins, but at night, the star's price is chosen by the roll of a dice block from Luna. This means the stars can price anywhere from 5 coins to 40 coins. My big problem with this board is that there's really nothing to do on the right side of the board. At least with the center and left side, you have stuff you can do. For the center, you can pay the thwomp and keep going around in a circle and purchasing stars, provided you have enough money and mushrooms for the toll. Along with this, there are a lot of duel spaces, and it really makes you think that they wanted you to duel and gamble on this board because the fair in the name. Although I always interpret it as a fair like a carnival, but it does seem that fair is something they want to go after, meaning duel spaces you evenly distribute the rewards until someone wins and then that person gets the stuff. So it's really interesting. Mechanically, I do think this board has potential, but the theme of the board does not fit the aesthetic nor the events that it happens out on. For me, I had to put this in C tier.
Snowflake Lake. Yeah, this is my least favorite board in 6. This is a new type of board where everyone starts with 5 stars and tries to steal them from each other by riding chain chops. I do appreciate the introduction of such a radical new mechanic, but I don't think this one works. It's interesting for sure, on paper, but after a while, it feels very rigid and homogenized. It pretty much boils down to player steals a star, player steals another star, player steals the star back. Rinse and repeat until the end of the game. Normally, the constant threat of stars being stolen at any point would be tense and engaging, but for some reason, the layout of the board counteracts this tension. The inner ring acts as a save area because chain chomps can't enter, which really undermines the aggressive nature of star stealing. What's even worse is that when it changes to night, the inner area gets blocked off, so if you're still in the outer ring, I guess you're just out of luck. One good thing is that this board has a few more duel spaces than usual, so that players have some chances to protect their stars. I feel like you should always be on edge, but this board isn't like that. Mechanically, this board feels rigid but also unbalanced at the same time. It also doesn't help that it looks like just another ice level with generic Christmassy music. Snowflake Lake is going in the D tier.
Snowflake Lake is an abomination of a board, and I will certainly say that with confidence. For me, this board only beats out Toy Dream, only because of the pure aesthetic from it. I personally have never liked boards where you have to steal stars from the other players, and this is because it amps up Mario Party from an already thin line of breaking friendships to full-on fisticuffs. Yes, I am biased here, mostly because I never played any of the boards where star stealing is the prominent piece of the board, but I can safely say I'm glad I never did play these styles.
Cause then I wouldn't have a lot of friends anymore.
There's one orb shop in the board that's always accessible, while the other is behind a paywall thwomp, which is 10 coins to get by, so get used to only being going on the one that's outside of that area. Speaking of the inner circle area with the thwomp, time your venture right, and the chomps used to steal the stars cannot even reach you if you're in the center. This is because during nighttime, large icebergs block the entrance to the center. This means it's a race to see who can hide in the center when the icebergs freeze over and block the inside area, essentially making you impervious. This makes it especially annoying since at any given time, at least 2 players will be fighting for dominance over star count, while the others tend to hide back. The music for this board is very Christmas-like and not in a good sense. It's the kind of one that gets grating on the ears after a while and slowly starts to feel a bit annoying.
Much like regular Christmas music.
I'm sorry to say, but this board has got to be low D tier for me.
Castaway Bay is personally my favorite board in Mario Party 6. Admittedly, I've played it so many times that it has kinda lost its charm, but nonetheless, I think this is a very solid board. The new mechanic this time is that DK with the stars at the end of the path, which can swap to Bowser taking away your star, and then switch back. Usually when someone arrives at the end of the path, the boats swap positions, but a few happening spaces also do the same, so it really feels like a game of hot and cold. If DK is in the front, you're trying to get there as fast as possible. If Bowser is in the front, you're trying to get there as slow as possible. You don't know what's going to happen next, and I love that uncertainty. This adds a lot of dynamics to an otherwise linear path. It also goes without saying that the aesthetics and music definitely sell the tropical feeling of Castaway Bay. It almost feels tourist trappy to me. I don't know why. The board looks a lot smaller than I remember, and I wish it had just a few more board events. But other than that, you could never go wrong with this board. I put Castaway Bay in the A tier.
Castaway Bay is certainly an interesting board for me to discuss. On one hand, it is one of the new better mechanics that shows that you don't have to steal stars in this game. Thank God. No, Castaway Bay is all about timing and trying to screw over your fellow partiers by timing your pace so you can meet up with either Donkey Kong or Bowser. As you know, the formula DK good, Bowser bad. You know, something that's been established since the first Mario Party. I really like the tropical vibe that this board has, and it gives me a mix of Sunshine and Yoshi's Tropical Island from Mario Party 1. Something weird that I noticed is that there are some boards where the Boo Hut is present and others where it is nowhere to be seen. This is pretty interesting considering up to at least Mario Party 4, Boo was in a lot of the boards in one way or another. And while that may be the case with the Boo Orb or the Boo Bell, it still feels a little weird to see that a Boo Hut only shows up every now and then. The Boo Hut on this board is placed very awkwardly in the middle, so maybe a bit before you get to it. A fun little tidbit that Yellow actually told me was that if Bowser's not the one at the end of the dock path and someone happens to land on the raft happening space, there's a small chance that Bowser will actually hit your raft with a cannonball, sending you back to start. There's a high risk versus high reward aspect if you're brave enough to run and gun straight for the end, and in that respect, I highly commend what you're trying to do for doing such a thing, but it generally won't end up well. This board is definitely a cool one, and I do like it aesthetically and mechanically, but the happening spaces don't wow me enough to call it one of the better boards. For its hard work and trying in a new mechanic and doing pretty well, I will place this board at the top of C tier.
Clockwork Castle, another awesome board. A really good final board too. If you notice, this one isn't explicitly Bowser themed, so the designers actually had the creative liberties to create something new. This board honestly has the most creative new mechanic out of all of them, so take the swapping Bowser DK star thing from Castaway Bay and have it move around the board. That's right, this is a truly dynamic board. This is how you spice up the formula and make it interesting. It never feels like you're playing the same board, because DK or Bowser are always moving and the players are always moving. Unlike the previous final boards, this one is chaotic for the right reasons compared to just being chaotic. The Sun and Moon are constantly fighting, so it makes sense that the day and night cycle play the biggest role on this board. It feels like the climax of the gimmick, which is awesome. Aesthetically, the board also feels very grandiose and medieval, easily feeling like the largest one. The music also reflects the finality of it all, like a celebration of all things Mario Party 6, which I think is so fitting. This is one of my go-to boards whenever I play 6. Clockwork Castle is going in the S tier.
Clockwork Castle. Now this is a pretty good board. This board has to be a very good send-off board since Mario Party 3 or 4. The main mechanic is DK and Bowser will roam the board, and whoever collides with them immediately and automatically buys a star or a czar. The main idea is to keep your distance if it's the last phase before the time changes, such as the last phase before night or the last phase before day. The pipes being able to be used to traverse the board quickly is a neat idea, and I do think this is the strongest board that has new mechanics towards it. Green and red pipes can be used to move around, done, while great pipes are the ones you cannot go through. While I commend this board, I also feel that it's trying too hard to do a lot for this game. Like, really trying to make as many different mechanics shown in this one board as possible. Brighton and Luna are the most rewarding happening spaces in the game in my opinion, as you always end up with a win-win if you can visit them during their respective times and land on their respective houses. Additionally, with DK and Bowser moving around the board, strategy changes all the time. Since the Star and Czar are not in fixed locations, replayability is quite large with this board. Aesthetically, this board looks and sounds very good with a Faire-like style of music playing the entire time, almost like send-off music. This is ironically the best send-off board in a while, and it isn't even a Bowser board. I have to place this in B tier.
Finally, we arrive at Mario Party 7. Let me get this out of the way. I don't like the overall Bowser mechanic at all. If you played this game, you know what I mean. Bowser impedes the game every 5 turns and inconveniences everyone in some form. What's horrible is that it's baked into every board. You can't avoid it. He's only there to be a complete nuisance and waste everyone's time. It feels like the developers just plopped Bowser into the mix to solve a problem that didn't exist. So to save you all of the complaining, assume that I hate the Bowser interruptions in every board. Now we can talk about the actual boards. Grand Canal is the last starter board on this list, and I'd say it's a fine board. Like I said, it's hard to balance a starter board to be interesting and simple at the same time. Personally, I think Toad's Midway Madness did it best, but this board isn't bad by any means. At least the setting is pretty to look at, instead of defaulting to generic and bright poppy colors. This one leans towards blues and tans, which makes this board look a bit more realistic. This is obviously modeled after a certain Italian city, with its canal, gondola, and leaning tower, and yes, thankfully the music sounds very Italian. It's a pretty substantial starter board, bigger than the previous starter ones. It's also asymmetrical in layout, so it doesn't fall into the trap of feeling smaller than it should. It's not really the first board I'd pick, it's just a nice board. I'm putting Grand Canal in the C tier.
Mario Party 7. The only other GameCube Mario Party game I have any real experience with. I'm once again gonna echo with Yellow here. The Bowser mechanic is more annoying than interesting, and I really don't like the way it feels. Yes, I feel that it's too annoying for 5 turns, but maybe if they changed it to every 10 turns, or even 7 or 8 turns, it would have been pretty decent, since it happens enough, but not enough as 5 turns. Now, we can finally talk about the first board, Grand Canal. As a starting board, this is one of the more interesting ones, as it's not only water themed, but it's based off a real place, and that of Italy. Mario Party 7 decides to loosely base its board off of real life places, and Italy being one of them is actually really funny to see, especially when you look at the plumber's background history. I actually really like how this board works, with the happening spaces working well with the theme and that they are fun? Yeah, it's weird. I didn't expect to see some of the happening spaces being as fun after the ones from 5 or 6 were kinda boring. However, I think the RNG in this board really works well here, as every one of the happening spaces gives you the chance of getting cold, hard cash. The one with the giant blooper having the chance of coins, a czar, or even a star is really, really cool. Interestingly enough, now it sounds like the board itself may actually be amazing, but I think it's more of the mechanics that are going for it rather than the actual board itself. This board is very good for comebacks, and I really think this is one of the better starting boards since Mario Party 4. So for me, this goes in a high B tier.
Pagoda Peak introduces another board variation. It's a combination of Faire Square and Castaway Bay, where the star is fixed at the end of the path, but its price changes periodically. The star begins at 10 coins, then increases by 10 until it reaches 40, which then resets back to 10. I think this is a great way to mix previous mechanics into a new concept. Pretty clever. This board is obviously very Asian inspired. If I had to guess, it's as if you're on a noble journey to reach the top of this mountain to prove yourself as a master. Even though this has the least amount of spaces, it never feels like a tiny board because of the verticality of it all. It's like every player is racing to become a master. This is another case of something always happening because the board events are all well dispersed. Many of the mechanics let you take your chances of cheating the journey, which prevents it from everyone generally being in the same area. I think the music is fine, very stereotypically Asian. This is very subjective, but I've absorbed a lot of Asian music in my life, so I've heard more than enough of this style of music. Admittedly, I get tired of hearing this track after a while, but that's purely just my taste. I have nothing against it. If it weren't for the music, I would rank Pagoda Peak in the A tier, but I'm actually gonna put this in the high B tier. Someone's gonna be mad at me for that. Sorry.
Pagoda Peak. This has to be one of the more interesting boards since the early Mario Party games. This is like a weird Asian version of Pirate's Dream and Faire Square meshed together in a blender. But the best part is, it came out better than the two boards that created it. Yes, I'm gonna say it, this board is great. I love the aesthetic. The music works incredibly well with its theme of a journey. Think Journey to the West. Additionally, I think that all the dual spaces placed in front of the dojo is pretty clever. This board introduces an orb known as the Cannon Orb, and it's really innovative. This orb is specifically for Pagoda Peak, and its job is to launch you anywhere from the very last space of the board to only one space ahead. The risk versus reward is well worth it if you want to try avoiding on that one space right in front of you that might be a Bowser space. That's probably the time to use it. This is when the boards from Mario Party started to become more than just boards, but locations that would be memorable for years after playing the game. This board is pretty solid, and if there was a place I would put it, it's definitely the A tier.
Pyramid Park. Here we go again. They know we loved the star stealing mechanic so much, so they did it again. Well, they did actually iterate and improve on this mechanic. Gone is the contradictory safe area. Nowhere is safe. And that's how it should feel. And there are many branching paths so it doesn't feel homogenized. Since the layout is a lot more varied, it doesn't seem like anyone's out of luck because a safe area isn't open. To no one's surprise, this board's design and music is very Egyptian influenced, with cobras, quicksand, and pyramids. Even though I still inherently don't like the star stealing mechanic, I'd say this board is a much better improvement over Snowflake Lake, a very clear step up. Pyramid Park is going in the C tier.
Oh boy, Pyramid Park. You already know how I feel about star stealing as a mechanic, so we're gonna knock the board down a peg based off of that. As it is a star stealing type of board, you're gonna have to make sure you constantly have enough coins to make it your main goal. Well, that and finding adequate distance between you and the other players. The big thing that you want to be aware of is the spacing from the top chain chomp, as it can use up to 3 blocks. This means anyone in the surrounding area or even someone completely far away is up to the blessing of RNG if you hit them or not. Using the quicksand happening spaces can help you avoid this, so it is a viable strategy to try and land on those if given the option. However, it also changes the placement of the characters on the other side of the quicksand. The aesthetic of the board is pretty interesting, but the music is pretty forgettable. It's definitely a step up from Snowflake Lake, but you'll really only enjoy this board if you like being in control. I really want to like this board, but for me, there just isn't enough to make it more different than the other star stealing boards before it. Unfortunately, this board has to go in D tier.
Now Neon Heights has an actual new board mechanic, where the star is randomly hidden in one of 3 chests that you must pay to open. One has the star, the other gives you 20 coins, and the last one rudely sends you back to start. Now this is a new type of board I can get behind. This board is kinda like Life, you know? And Life is like a box of... Nah, I'm kidding. I'm not that cheesy. But I love that you're still chasing the star, but you don't know exactly where. It makes every star you find a little more exciting. The design is definitely like NYC, with skyscrapers, a baseball field, and definitely not the Statue of Liberty. The music reminds me a lot of Goomba's Greedy Gala, or like a Broadway show. I get the anything is possible vibe from this one. I feel kinda excited to play Neon Heights because there's always something happening every turn. If you've noticed, the boards I like always have something interesting going on. Well, actually, Neon Heights does run into an issue with the shooting gallery. You're going to be watching that event a lot because it's on the main path to get to the other parts of the board. It gets old very quickly, but despite that, it's my favorite board from Mario Party 7 and something I would recommend first. I'm putting Neon Heights in the A tier.
Neon Heights was something I wasn't sure I was going to be a big fan of, but luckily that was shattered soon after I realized its mechanic is very similar to Kamek's library from Mario Party DS, and I really have to respect that. The board mechanics for this are really enjoyable, with the shooting gallery being really cool, but slowly realizing that it gets old very quick. Yes, it's an amazing way to earn up to 15 coins per run, but then you realize every time someone gets sent back to start from a bomb chest, you're gonna be seeing it a lot. The other happening space is a baseball themed event that gets you 2 coins per home run, and it's a bit better in my opinion since you won't be seeing it as often as the shooting gallery. You're gonna be going around this board really quickly, trying to get the chest and trying to get to places that will give you coins easily. Along the way you have the chance to use the toll booth operated by Koopa Kid, which will have you paying 10 coins to pass, making a shortcut that can either make or break your chances of getting a box containing the star. Looks like a larger board, but it's actually just multiple sections slapped together, so it's a bit of an illusion in that sense. This board is definitely one you'll want to pick if you plan on playing Mario Party 7. It's gotta go in A tier for me.
Windmillville, yet another new type of board. I admit, talking about these boards is a lot more interesting compared to the older Mario parties. This time, it's a different take of obtaining stars. Investing. Every time a player passes by a windmill, they have the option to invest as many coins as they want, and the player that invests the most coins claims the windmill star. Some windmills even have 2 or 3. This is basically a capitalist board. You're still stealing stars from opponents, but instead you're trying to outbuy them, which I think works a lot better. The alternating paths return, so you can't waltz into any windmill you'd like. It can get very annoying trying to go where you actually want to go, but I get that it's a necessary evil. The developers took what didn't work from Snowflake Lake and truly improved it. Before, it felt like the person who had the most luck was going to dominate. Now everyone has more agency because they're investing their own coins in order to have the most stars. This type of board desperately needed more strategy, and Windmillville gave exactly that. The aesthetics of this board is a bit too similar to Towering Treetop. If it weren't for the windmills, this environment would have been too generic. The music sounds like some sort of harvest festival. I don't really care for it personally, but you know, music tastes. This board isn't one that I jump to, but it's a nice change of pace from the regular formula, one that is actually tolerable. Windmillville is going in the B tier.
Windmillville is yet another one of those new style of boards that are going to be shown off in this game. With flowers closing after you go over them, there are a lot of branching paths that you can take. This also goes to say that if you play your cards right, you can stop the other players from taking control of the windmill that has the most stars currently. Yes, in an odd take, this board takes a Monopoly style of star owning, where if you put the highest amount of coins in a windmill, you get the amount of stars that that windmill currently has. Something weird that I noticed was that there was only one really accessible orb shop, as the other one is near the 3-star windmill, which is blocked by 2 sets of flowers that switch off every time someone jumps on them. The flower rides that are offered to you feel similar to Towering Treetop from Mario Party 6, but these have clearly defined destinations, and some of them can actually provide a good skip if necessary, making it so you can protect a windmill that you're currently the owner of. Yes, this board, while a bit odd, does seem like one of the better boards, and I love the very Dutch style of theme it has going on. For me, this board is the middle of B tier.
Last but not least, we have Bowser's Enchanted Inferno with an exclamation point. And would you look at that, they finally did it. They actually designed a good Bowser board. I'm proud of them. This is how you design a chaotic board. The final one actually goes back to basics mechanically, where players are chasing after one clear star space, which oddly feels fitting. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing enchanted about this board. It's still designed to make players suffer, but now it doesn't feel pointless. This is the most balanced Bowser board yet. It took them a while to make the unfair seem fair enough. It's challenging to balance chaos, the board, but this is probably the closest they got. This board is divided into 4 sections, which all give players the option to circle back around or advance to the next section, which solves the issue I had with Rainbow Dream. This layout also helps this Bowser board stand out from the rest. Admittedly, the branching paths feel very disorienting whenever you're going back and forth, but that might just be me. Every element feels deliberately placed throughout the board so that someone is bound to suffer, but in a good way. Wait, that sounded weird. The music is actually a remix of Bowser's general theme that you heard all throughout Mario Party 7, which I definitely welcome because it feels like a culmination of Bowser's impact on the game, much like Clockwork Castle. I guess since Bowser is a nuisance in every board, it does feel right to have his own board to torment everyone, but I still don't like the Bowser mechanic in this game. He contributes nothing but suffering. Anyway, Bowser's Enchanted Inferno, exclamation point, goes into the B tier.
And now we get to the big boy, the final board of the Mario Party GameCube era. This one is unsurprisingly a Bowser board. But what's this? This board is actually fun to play? Now hold on, I know the last few boards as a finale haven't been the greatest, but there are a lot of things that work towards this board's favor. First off, this board is a Bowser board, so usually the aesthetics are kinda meh, but the way it integrates a bunch of mechanics like the sumo ring from Mario Party 4, above the lava, and a set of tracks on the other side of the board and pipes makes it feel really different from the last few ones. Save for the lava. Yes, the castle motif is mostly not there, and it's just a bunch of different things that work towards Bowser's board. In a way, it kind of feels like hell, but I wouldn't go that far as to call it that. Secondly, it feels like the spacing for this board is really well made, as there are 2 orb shops, both on the opposite diagonal side of the board, making it so that no matter where you are, you do have a high chance of being able to reach one. The islands that are connected to one another allow for shortcuts to get to a better place where the star currently is, but at the same time, it's a gamble to go on on some of those, as in my opinion, the most interesting Bowser mechanic of this game is that there is a chance a random island will sink at the end of the 5th turn. This makes it so that way it's either one of the ones with the star or one that a player or multiple players are on. And this allows for a lot of chaos, but it does have a high chance of potentially not happening. If you or another player is on the same island, that leaves potentially 3 other islands that can be hit if you don't include the star space. To me, this is the most balanced Bowser mechanic, as yeah, it only hits a few people, but there is a chance that all of you could be hit or none of you could be hit. Everyone loses coins one way or another on this board, and while that sounds kind of crappy, you can easily make some of it back with the board events such as the sumo one. In a very, very low statistic as well, there is a chance you can get a start if you choose the right path from the bottom island's happening space. And maybe it's a bit biased that I am an absolute god for getting this star, but I really did like this board event. This board is challenging, and it finally gives Bowser the proper board since 4 to have a grand old time with. Top of B tier for me, easily.
And with that, we finally ranked all 25 boards from the GameCube Mario Party games. What a mouthful. Here's the final ranking for both of us. Needless to say, this was a bit of an undertaking. Definitely the biggest video I've made so far. But it was nice to casually talk about each board with our own thoughts. And we all know it's satisfying to rank things in a tier list. At the end of the day, playing Mario Party with friends is always a blast, regardless of which board is picked. So all of my complaints are just very subjective, and we all have different preferences.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, that was both fun and horrifying. I'm really happy to say that we can give our own perspective on the boards while still finding common ground. Nothing beats playing Mario Party with good friends and being able to debate about which boards might be good or just might be booze-haunted trash levels of fun, while still being able to enjoy the game. I'm very thankful you let me help you on this project, and I know it's been a very long process doing this, so I really want to thank you, Yellow, for having me on here.
Let me just say a gigantic thank you to BladedStrider for joining me in ranking 25 whole boards. What a trooper. He's a personal friend of mine, and I really appreciate that he was able to talk about Mario Party with me. And of course, please go check out his channel. I think it's fair to say that he also likes making videos about games.
Yeah, I make a few every videos now and then when I can, mostly non-commentated Yakuza playthroughs, but that may soon change as I do actually have some reviews of my own in the works. Anyways, thanks again for having me, Yellow.
Feel free to yell at us in the comments about how wrong our rankings are, or you know, just yell at us in general. Again, tier list is in the description, and with that, thank you for watching. Okay, bye.